Hi there, this is Mark Payne. It's been a long time since I've done an Apple Silicone update for you. I've just been through a whole M2 Pro debacle. I ended up getting a M2 Mac Mini, which ended up going back, and I replaced it for a Mac Studio. So I'm going to take you through M1 to M2 to M2 Pro to the new M2 Pro Mac Mini, and why I've ended up back at M1 Mac Studio. So let's get into it.
Got to unify, 'cause we're only useful when they join our hands.
In section 1, we'll look at the base level for comparisons that we're going to make. I was an early adopter of the M1 Apple Silicone machine. I got in November, December 2019, and I produced some of those YouTube videos around music production. For a humble guy that's got 12,000 subscribers, that video comparing the M1 Air to the M1 Pro has had nearly 500,000 views, so thank you for that. It's been a long time since I've done a review, but let's start with the baseline of the M1. In section 2, we'll talk about how the M1 Pro became a game changer for me, bringing desktop performance to a portable machine. Section 3, so I was influenced very much by the recent Apple event where the new M2 Pro was announced and became available in a Mac Mini format. After the event, the day after, I ordered the machine, and I had it for 2 days. I fought it and decided to give in with it, and I'll be explaining why I ended up with the Mac Studio, which is based on the M1 Max chip. Section 4, we'll look at my benchmark results of comparing my Intel Studio machine to my M1 Pro machine and my M1 Mac Studio, and in there I'll explain where the benchmarks that I took from the M2 Mac Mini sat. In section 5, we'll look at real life performance of Final Cut Pro and how my typical workflow works on all of these machines. In section 6, we'll look at my Logic Pro workflow for doing post-production of audio from live shows and see how that compares between my original iMac Pro and M1 Pro and Mac Studio. In section 7, I'll conclude why the M1 Mac Studio was the winner for me and why I'm happy with the compromises made. So section 1, let's review Apple Silicone. So started with the M1. This is the bog standard Air with 7 GPUs, not 8. There's pretty much zero difference in performance between the Air and the MacBook Pro from the 13-inch era of M1. End of 2019 these machines were, and they were a miracle because there is just no way you could get this kind of performance density into a form factor so small. What was happening towards the beginning of 2019 is that the 13-inch and the 16-inch MacBooks, which were Intel based, if you made them performant, they would just cook themselves. You would have mad fan speeds and very, very hot laptops. When I benchmark, I keep the figures, so I've got some kind of historical background. This is the M1 machine as it was introduced at the end of 2019, and you can see that the single core performance was very, very good. These are Geekbench scores. Although the single core performance is very good, the multi-core performance was good, but slightly less than the comparable machine for me at the time would have been this iMac Pro. And pretty much my Logic sessions that I could run on my studio machine, my Intel Studio machine, they would run on the M1 machine, and the M1 machine would be heavily utilized. And at the beginning also, we had some Rosetta issues where some of my plugins were having to run in Rosetta mode, not native, so that was an issue. Of course, by now all the plugins that I run have all been converted over to Apple Silicone. So if we think about this on the GPU side, then not so good. Here we've got the performance of the M1, the original M1 machine, in terms of its GPUs. Now remember, there was only 8 GPUs. When we go over and compare this 8 GPU Apple Silicone solution from this era of 2019-2020 to the Vega 64 GPU, then there's quite a different story. story. So if I was doing like I am now, like a 3-camera 4K shoot where I'm going to also be doing computer screen overlays, it just was a little bit lumpy. If you remember back at the time, really annoying, we only had 2 ports here, 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, and you would probably end up using one for charging. Because of that, I would end up using something like the Stone Pro dock, which would give me the connectivity that I needed for additional USB, you know, HDMI, screen ports, to be able to put in a camera card into the side of the thing. So section 2, what happened next was the 14-inch version of the MacBook. Now, I've always been a fan of the smaller MacBook Pros. For me, because I've got desktop machines, if I want to sit down in the studio and do things, I do that on a desktop. I always prefer the portability of the 13 and 14-inch machines, but that's just me. With the 14-inch, we got back the ports, so a MagSafe power connection, which is fantastic to have. Then you've got a couple of Thunderbolt ports this side and the connectivity for your headphones, and then the other side you've got another Thunderbolt port, HDMI, and the ability to put your camera slots in, so friendlier to use. This one's got a skin on it just to stop me from scratching it, so please forgive that, because that might not be to your taste, but what was to your taste is the performance of the machine. So as standard, the M1 Pro machine would come with an 8-core CPU, and that was 6 performance cores and 2 high efficiency cores. I configured this with 10 core, and that was 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. Now, it is true that the battery life of this machine is not quite as good as the original machines. It's just compromised by a couple of hours, and that's what you get if you carry more power around with you. It's going to use more battery life. Now, how much more power? Well, it was really, really impressive. So this is my 10-core machine, and you'll notice now that the CPU performance has well outstripped that of my original iMac Pro, and that is basically because there's more cores. There's double the number, in my case, there's double the number of high performance cores in there to do the work. So the single core performance was much better, and also therefore the multi-core performance scaled with it. Instead of having the original 8 GPU cores that we had in the M1 machine, this machine has got 16 GPU cores. We've gone into GPU scores here in the 40,000 OpenGL and Metal, and that's starting to compare with the performance that we saw in the iMac Pro. In fact, I could argue that in some situations I thought that the workflow was better, and I think the speediness of it comes down to the H.264 and ProRes encoders that are now built into the machine. So very, very, very good performance for Final Cut Pro. I took this on the plane to Lanzarote to go see my sister, and I was editing video for the 4-hour flight, and I really felt comfortable doing that. And these were, you know, 3-camera multicam shoots. So section 3, let's talk about putting this into a desktop computer then. So I'm inspired by the M1 Pro in its laptop format. If you were doing this today, you'd do an M2 Pro, and in effect the M2 is maybe 10% more performance in the CPU, and maybe the GPU is a little bit better on a like-for-like basis if you're comparing the same number of GPUs. Be careful, because these configurations can have different numbers of GPUs in them. So I'm thinking, well, look, I can get an M2 Pro now in a desktop system, and I was taken in by the Apple event where the M2 was announced in the mini format, and I'm thinking that's got to be the way to go. So I can leave behind the old Intel days and go forward with Apple Silicone in my desktop. So in terms of the M2, if I want a desktop leading kind of performance, I'm going to be at the Pro end of this spectrum. Well, I upgraded to the 12-core CPU. This is 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. I went to 32 gigabytes of memory because that's what I would want in a desktop machine. Not bothered about the SSD storage, that's just fine for me. I made the decision to not upgrade the gigabit Ethernet to 10 gig, more on that later, and that was my base machine. Now, it's a $2,000 option. In the UK that would be a £2,000 option. It's the same, dollar and pound pricing is the same. Obviously we have a good favourable exchange rate with pound, but we then have to add on the VAT. It ends up being about the same figure. And over here you'll notice that this does, frustratingly or surprisingly, compare exactly to the price of the M1 Max version of the Mac Studio, which again is very similar in terms of its 32 gigabytes, 512 gigabyte SSD. So that would be your comparison to make, and I thought, well, I'll go with the M2 because it's newer, it's going to be more performant than the M1 Mac Studio. Got to be the way to go. So that is what I bought. That's not what's sat here because I sent it back. The problems that I had, some of them are going to be specific to me, I will admit. It was very difficult for me to get SoundGrid Studio, which is the user environment that talks to my iOS interface that I use in the studio. That's my audio interface that brings in microphones. For example, I'm recording through it right now. I couldn't get the user interface to connect reliably, and when I did get it to connect reliably, I couldn't make it patch, and when I did manage to make it patch, I could always hear faint audio artifacts in the background. Now, it is true that with Apple Silicone, right from the very beginning, Apple have played quite loose and dirty with some of the 802.3 protocols for prioritizing network traffic, which is used a lot in audio. This is one of the reasons why Dante and Audinate had horrible problems with making Dante Virtual Sound Card work, and even we didn't see DVS for a good year and a half after the release of Apple Silicone, as they tried to code around some of the things that Apple had backed out in the protocols for the network port. Maybe if I'd have purchased my Mac Mini with a 10 gigabit interface, I might not have had that problem, but my fear was these problems are being caused by Ventura, and that my Wave SoundGrid hasn't quite caught up with that yet. I was going to be riding an unpleasant learning curve for maybe the next 4 or 5 months. It's not a place that I wanted to be. Issue number 2, the performance of the M2 Mac Mini really wasn't really any better than the Mac Studio, and I'll show you those numbers. So not really a performance advantage compared to Mac Studio in my opinion. And then the ergonomics, it just doesn't have the main feature that it's missing in terms of the ergonomics is it doesn't have the ports on the front or the card slot, which is really helpful for interfacing, especially the card slot. I keep pulling my camera card out, lobbing it in there. It's very, very easy to do. The Mac Mini M2 and this Mac Studio are very, very similar in terms of their connectivity on the back. You've got 4 Thunderbolt ports, 4 Thunderbolt 4s. You've got a network port, which on the Mac Studio, that is a 10 gig. That is its standard configuration. On the M2, you would have to configure it and choose the 10 gigabit option. That would add $100 to the price. I would suggest you do that if audio interfacing is your thing. Do that. Don't make the mistake I made. Then we've got a couple of USBs, HDMI and a headphone port, pretty much the same on the back of a Mac Mini. What you don't have on a Mac Mini is you don't have the slot at the front for your camera card, and you don't have, in this case, these are USB 3s. Then they're not Thunderbolt 4s on this basic version of the Mac Studio. If you upgrade to the Mac Studio Ultra, I wouldn't do it. It's kind of twice the money, and you're going to be at a $4K dollar number if you do that. And but then you get Thunderbolt 4 ports on the front. That's why 2 days later, I decided to throw the towel in, went into the Apple store in Reading, and walked in with the Mac Mini, gave them it back, and walked out with a Mac Studio and £100 in my pocket, actually, because it turns out that the Mac Studio in the UK is actually £100 cheaper. So welcome to section 4, when we'll discuss the benchmark measures that I took when I had the Mac Mini M2. It's got to be past 6 o'clock somewhere else in the world, so join me if it's time for you. I believe this makes my YouTube performance better, but probably your mileage might vary. And our choice is to max out. So in this situation, we've maxed out 12 core. That's 8 performance cores and 4 high efficiency cores. That compares very well with the 8 performance cores that's in the M1 Pro as well, although the M1 Pro, remember, only has 2 efficiency cores. So there's a little bit more CPU power there in the M2, both in terms of the number of cores, and also they're slightly faster, they're clocked slightly faster. There should be an increase in CPU power. It's no surprise, you see, we're comparing my Mac Pro M1 with 10 cores, with the M2 improved with 12 cores, and in terms of benchmarking for CPU performance, yes, the single core performance is better because it's an M2, and yes, the multi-core performance is better because it's aggregate of the single core performance, and also it's more cores. Now, interesting here, because obviously I did replace with the Mac Studio, which is an M1 Max machine, also 10 cores, so it's a very similar configuration in terms of number of cores to the MacBook Pro. And you can see here that, yeah, very similar. Obviously it's going to be very similar CPU performance on benchmarking because it's effectively the same machine. What is more interesting is when we look at GPU performance. Now, as we know, the maxed out M2 Mini has 19 cores of GPU. Now, when will we use the GPU? Well, majorly, if you're using Final Cut, you'll find, I'll show you later, that if you render in Final Cut and also transcode your final output, then Final Cut will eat up all the GPU that you've got available, and your rendering times will be dependent on your GPU speed, actually. The Mac Studio, which I have here, is the base version of that is 24 cores for the GPU, whereas when you look at the M2 Mini, it's 19 GPU cores, and you could argue that those cores are maybe more performant than the M1 cores, but the net effect is that a 24 core base model Mac Studio is coming up with better GPU results than the 19 core M2 Mini, and maybe that's not an expected result. Certainly in terms of CPU, it is true that the M2 Mac Mini is winning the benchmark tests, but in terms of GPU, it isn't. 19 M2 GPU cores is not as good as 24 M1 cores in the Mac Studio. A test that you can run and is available, you can download it, is a Bruce X test, which you can run through Final Cut, which is just basically a rendering exercise, and it's going to take in the order of 10 to 20 seconds depending on the performance of the machine. When you run this, you find that you're going to be GPU limited. Now, in running this, my 10 core old iMac Pro with the Vega 64 will complete the Bruce X in about 12 seconds. And we're seeing very similar performance coming from both the M2 Mini and also the Mac Studio. Really, there's nothing in it. You have to run a stopwatch and time a render to finish and for the video to pop up. So it's not extremely accurate, but somewhere within the 12-13 seconds is very, very respectable. When you bear all of this in mind and you realise that the really isn't a lot of difference in performance between the Mac Studio and also the M2 Mac Mini. And also you have to consider that I was having problems with the Mac 2 Mini on Ventura working correctly with some of my sound hardware, and you also consider some of the ergonomic differences or the advantages of running the Mac Studio. You can see that it wasn't too much of a difficult job for me to take back the M2 Mini based on those benchmarks. So welcome back. I've had a bit of a break because I've been in bed with food poisoning for a week, but this is now section 5 where I wanted to discuss real live Final Cut performance. Now a lot of people just won't show you this stuff because I've just found a lot of YouTubers are keen on copy and pasting from pretty Apple events or showing you pictures of Apple products in smoke, but they just don't want to show you the real usage of stuff. They might show you some Final Cut benchmarks or something with maybe Logic where they're using some kind of audio thing where they just keep adding tracks, but they're not actually using the applications. And so I when I do these things, I use my workloads. So we've got my iMac Pro, which is a 10-core Intel machine. It actually ends up being 20 logical cores because of hyperthreading, so it's effectively a 20 core machine. My first comparison is going to be with my M1 Pro, which we know is an 8-core high performance 8-core machine. It's got 2 efficiency cores as well, but we're just going to be concentrating on the performance cores. It's going to be quite similar to, hiding behind it is the Studio machine, the Mac Studio, which we will get to, but that's also 8 performance cores as well. Obviously we've got the Vegas 64 GPU that I originally specified with this machine back in 2017, 2018. Very powerful, expensive GPU. My M1 Pro has got the 16-core GPU on it. Obviously Apple Silicone system on chip GPU, and the Mac Studio has got 24 GPU cores. Generally my videos are going to end up being up to maybe an hour, but I've just taken a 3-minute slice of this, and it's my normal workload where maybe I've got 3 4K streams which I've assembled into a multicam with some kind of overlay. My main camera is a Sony Alpha 7C, and then in addition I might use phones like an iPhone 13 for close-ups. So you can see here we've got the 3 feeds of multicam. I record audio separately, and then here I've done some title overlay, which is a really crazy inefficient way of doing it because I'm overlaying 12 different titles as separate items, and this is running. The work throughput is pretty good. I can stop it, skim it, go somewhere else. We are set here in best quality mode, so I'm taking no prisoners here. I'm going to be quite stringent now and turn on the options to stop playback if I start dropping frames. If I start to jump around, there you go. So I've dropped a frame there. So I'll say OK to that and continue. Dropped a frame. So OK, continue. Dropped a frame again. Let's just turn off the preferences to see the drop frames, and let's see now if I can see evidence of visually of that happening. So can you see that slowed down now? In the playback I'm dropping frames all the time here. It's not really going to stop me from working on this video, but it's a bit tedious. Graphics utilization on iStatistica Pro is just basically 100% would be all of the GPU that's available to me. And I'm only using 31% of the GPU. Also have a look here, you'll find that we're not under particular CPU pressure. We're only using 25% overall of CPU capability. Final Cut is using 76% of CPU. Now what does that actually mean? It's not 76% of the total capability of the machine, it's 76% of one of the 20 cores. So I could throw more cores at this and it wouldn't make any difference because I'm not using the cores that I have. We could throw more GPU at this and I'm not sure that would make any difference either. So what's the bottleneck? in this situation? It's hard to know because it isn't GPU and it isn't CPU. So some people might say, well, it's disks. If you had faster disks, you wouldn't be dropping frames. Now, it's an interesting point, but in this case, to be really fair to the iMac Pro, I'm running this from the internal 2TB SSD. Now, just to show you the performance of that SSD, I'm going to run Blackmagic Design, start the test. So this is now running at nearly 3,000 megabytes per second. So that's 3 gig a second is the capability of that in terms of write speed, read speed, just slightly less, 2.5 gigs a second, which is stonkingly and incredibly fast. And so we're reading around 47 megabytes per second. If I go to the highest load area, which will be this rendered area where I've got lots of overlays, you'll see that we're into the order of 89, 105 megabytes per second. So 105 megabytes per second coming from a disk that's capable of 2,500 megabytes per second. Can you see that you can't make the argument that making the disk faster would stop the frame dropouts? It just wouldn't. So it's not CPU, it's not GPU, it's not disks. So what's left? There's memory. Okay, if you look in this area, the green area is free memory. So we've got 5, this is a 32 gigabyte machine. We've got 5 gigabytes of memory that we just don't know what to do with. And also the cache area, which is 10 gigabytes of memory, is pretty much also memory that the machine doesn't know what to do with. It's just thrown it in as file system cache. This is down to some kind of internal architectural limitations. Maybe it's memory bandwidth with trying to get data from the system memory, and also the GPU memory. Remember, these two things are in separate areas in this machine, and we're going to have a lot of flowing of data between these things when we're rendering and outputting. So maybe there are efficiencies or inefficiencies with the way the software can work with all of this, and this is the kind of limitation of that Intel world, I would say. Now, when we put that aside and have a look at the laptop, now I'm running the project is being run off an SSD. Now, the capability of this SSD is more like 700 megabytes per second. We were only requiring maybe 100 megabytes per second. So already I'm pretty confident that that's way fast enough. Yeah, we're set to stop if I drop a frame, and also let's just check that we are in best quality mode. Okay, let's give it a start. So I'll jump around a bit.
The chassis in a very secure way. It's holding in,
and
so some people single piece beam.
Let's just stop it. It's very smooth. Jump in.
The A12, and how do we set it up? 7.
Nothing really going. Nothing dropping.
Screws at the rear main.
Not dropped a frame.
Suspension plates that we have from.
Still not dropped a frame.
Beginning. And how do we?
We'd see that because I'm set to warn and stop. We're 2023, and Apple own this world, don't they? They're providing us with Final Cut, and also they are providing us with the silicon, and obviously they can make this, they can write this in a way that they make best use of their own GPUs and their own CPUs. So I maybe shouldn't be surprised that it's in a very efficient package. We are harnessing 69-70% of the GPU capability. 81% it's just gone up to. We are really leaning into the GPU capability that we've got. Screen capture is using 26% of GPU, so that's maybe a little bit naughty because I'm stealing some of the machine away. It was similar over on the iMac Pro, to be honest, although I think the screen capture on the iMac Pro runs a little more efficiently than it does on a Apple Silicone machine. Go figure. You could throw more CPU at this and it just wouldn't make this any better. In terms of workflow, I don't need it to be any better. If my Final Cut work experience as I'm editing and going around is already faster than I can think and move, then it doesn't need to be any faster than that. It's pretty damn good, isn't it? Now let's just do a rendering test. So I'm going to, on these two machines, do final output of the 4K final video. Save, and click start. So we're in a rendering race. Yeah, we're running up there. We're definitely running here as well, I think. Are we running? He's at 2%. And he's at 36%. That's interesting. We're 57% done on the Intel machine, but on my Apple Silicone machine, you know, we're hardly out the starting blocks. We're at 1%. That's not right. And that's what makes these kind of practical things really hard to do for YouTube. So my guess is, I mean, the thing I'm doing here, which isn't normal, is I'm running screen capture. So stop recording. You see, that's really getting on with it now. So there's an incompatibility between doing screen records and running Final Cut. I'm going to do it again. When that one's finished, I'll start this one and restart the clock. That's just finished 5 minutes 43. That's just popped up. So 5:43, save that, start the clock. 5:43 to beat. Things will slow down a lot when we get into this area because there's quite a lot of work to do. Now look, we're smacking the GPUs now. We're at 100% of GPU capability. So the GPU in this situation is very much the bottleneck. So that's really interesting that in the Apple Silicone situation, where probably by now Final Cut has been properly optimized to run on Apple Silicone, it's rammed into all of the cores of GPU that we are able to provide. And in a way, that's really encouraging. That tells me that this would scale performance now. If you buy a machine with more GPU than the 16 that's in here, potentially is going to go faster. 90%. Boom, it's done. 529, it beat it. Am I bothered by this? I mean, it's faster in terms of its rendering throughput than the older Intel machine is. Are we surprised? Not really. But that for me isn't the main benefit. The main benefit is that in terms of a user experience editing Final Cut, it's seamless and I don't drop frames. To make this video, it probably takes me 2 days to conceive it, probably a day or so to experiment with different ideas. It takes me 2 days to video it, and then it takes me a couple of days to edit it. This damn thing will have about 10 man days of my time in it. Am I really bothered whether it takes an hour to render or an hour and 20 minutes to render? I'm just going to go and drink a glass of wine while that's happening. So for me, it's all about the user experience as I'm editing. So we're on the Mac Studio now just to compare the rendering performance. I've moved the project over. We've been a bit unfair to the Mac Studio. I am screen recording at the moment, which, as you appreciate, I will need to stop when I do the render because it screws the render up. And I'm also running Logic and recording on this as well. I don't expect this to be any worse than my M1 Pro was. Stop it, scan around, jump in somewhere else, start again. It's effectively the same core machine as over here, except it's a Mac, so it's got a bit more memory bandwidth. It's got more H.264 encoders, more ProRes encoders. So let's see if that makes a difference when we do final output and start. So I've started the clock. Oh, sorry to have to do this to you, but high production value here, isn't it? You just rotate my camera around so you can see my eye statistic. So I feel embarrassed about having to do this and not being able to screen record for you, but you can see we're using here, there's 100% of graphics utilization being chewed up. This is a 24 GPU machine, and we've lent in and we're using 100% of it. So if we've used 100% of more cores, there's more stuff going on faster here, we would hope, and so maybe we'll see this go a bit quicker. We're at 2.5 minutes in and still smacking the GPUs at 100% down here. 92, 93, there it is. Stop the clock. Stop. 5 minutes 02. I was a bit late with that. Let's call it 5 minutes between friends. So the conclusions of Final Cut then is that, you know, the faster machines render faster. My main point is that the point where we are with M1 Pro, this would also apply to M2 Pro, is that we've got machines that are clearly much more capable of giving you a much more comfortable 4K user experience while you're editing. You can achieve much higher render speeds if you want to buy more GPU. Now you could go for the Ultra, which is going to be 48 cores. Really, is it worthwhile spending twice the money when your edit experience wouldn't be any different, and your render time, instead of waiting maybe an hour and a half to render a 1 hour piece of material, you'd be waiting 45 minutes. Is that worth the extra $2,000 you'd spend on the machine to achieve it? I'm not sure that it is. So for me, standard Mac Studio is the way to go. Now, if you remember back to the benchmarks for the Mini, the Mini Pro 2, M2 Pro, was a 19 core machine, so it wouldn't fare very well in this render test, which we already know through its GPU performance benchmarks. So section 6, we're going to look at logic performance. We'll compare logic performance on the iMac Pro, again with the M1 Pro machine, Apple Silicone, and also how that compares on Mac Studio. Let me just go through a typical logic setup for me. Most of the work that I do with logic is the post-production of live shows. I use a test piece to give me some consistency when I'm comparing machines, which is some of Martin Gordon's music. If you want to know about logic tuning, I'll put a link in the notes below. I've done quite a detailed piece on tuning logic to get the best out of plug-in performance, both on Intel machines and on Apple Silicon. If you want to see the full video, I'm going to put a link to that in the notes, so you can have a look at what this looks like and what it sounded like. I'm a big user of Console 1, so every channel has got the Console 1 plugin on it, and that enables me to effectively mix audio using a box of knobs. So that gives me front end gate, front end compressor, EQ, and some drive control on every channel, very much like I would use a a digital console for live shows. So I do pretty much know general channel EQ or general channel dynamics within Logic itself. That's all done within the Console 1 plugin. I'll use Pro G from FabFilter. That's my chosen gate. That'll be on all the toms and some of the drums. I'll use Waves delays, which are the Mani delays. My chosen reverbs will be Seventh Heaven from Liquid Sonics. I use the SSL bus compressors on all of my mix buses. You can see those there. And also I use some dead stop limiters from Waves, and I'm a big fan of the L3 Multi Maximizer, which is my kind of final stage mastering plugin to use up all the bits. And I use the WLM Waves meter and also the PAZ meter for metering stereo spread and position. It's about 30-40 channels. My records live are generally 96K, which come natively from my console of choice would be Midas HD. I've allowed Logic to use all of the threads of the machine for processing plugins. It's around a 30% average utilization of those threads. We're looking at an overall machine utilization in the region of 25%. And even a more complex show, live show for me, maybe up to 60 channels, 70 channels, I'm really not going to have any problems. Now, this kind of environment would also run on an M1 Apple Silicone machine. Again, go to the link, you'll find me doing that right at the get-go, at the beginning of Apple Silicone with the original M1 machines. Now, the challenges back in the day when I was first doing this would have been compatibility issues, where a lot of the plugin providers hadn't yet gone over to Apple Silicone in their coding, and so there was a lot of Rosetta things going on. Logic was a bit lumpy to work in that situation, and really I found the best way of running Logic was to run Logic in Rosetta, and then the bridge to the Rosetta orientated plugins was a lot tidier. Anyway, I don't want to repeat things that I've done a lot of detailed video work on. So before we move on to looking at this on Apple Silicone machines, let's just do a render test just to see how long it takes to knock a song out on this system. 16-bit will bounce out at 44.1. So imagine we're cutting a file to go on a CD. That started. It's about 3.5 minutes of song this, so you can see it's getting through it. We've got an overall utilization of 27%, however, and Logic would appear to be using 500% CPU. Remember, there are 20 cores here. 500% will be using 5 of them, so that's not at all 400% of the machine. 5 out of 20 is a quarter of the machine. It's around 25% utilization, and in actual fact that's what iStatistica is telling us. So what's holding it back? Because I don't think it's disk I/O, so we can have a quick look at that. We've got a read rate of 15 megabytes per second. You can see that down here. There's nothing to write home about. This is on the internal drive, which is, you know, an order of 100 times faster than that, if you like. So we're not short of disk performance. I'm just keeping an eye on this as it goes. Oh, it's just finished, so let's stop. That rendered out in 1 minute 37, and it's not clear to me what the bottleneck was yet. I didn't really have time to think about what the bottleneck is. We're banging out audio at about twice real speed. You know, I don't really need that to go any quicker than that. I've never had a problem with my Intel machine running Logic. You've seen that in Final Cut there's certainly some really good benefits of going to the latest kind of Mac Studio or M2 Pro or M1 Pro type 14-inch or 16-inch laptops, but Logic, happy days. So onto the 14-inch M1 Pro. It's exactly the same session. You can see here that again, really now we're on the a reduced number of cores. We're presenting this as 8 cores, not 20 cores, logical cores. We're not loading those cores at all. We're down in the 25%. In some way, you could argue that the balance of plug-in load over the number of threads is a smoother balance actually. The top user of CPU in this case is the AU hosting service. That is the plug-in overhead, which is using the most CPU, and you can see that that's now all Apple Silicone. So pretty much everything that I'm running now, FabFilter, Console One, Liquid Sonics and Waves, they're all running native Apple Silicone now. So there's no Rosetta, and Logic itself is running Apple Silicone. I'm no longer running that Rosetta. So the whole thing is a lot tidier and much more reliable than we had in the early days of Apple Silicone back in 2020. So yeah, same render test. Let's make sure we've got normalize off. You can see here that while we're doing this, we seem to be using 56% of CPU. So I would suggest that we're leaning into the CPU resource in a more efficient way than we were on the previous machine. So I'm expecting this to render out faster than it did on the Intel system. It's done. So that's at 105. So that's significantly faster actually than it was on the Intel machine. I'm just going to do a rerun with screen recording turned off. I don't think it's going to affect us here because this is certainly not GPU limited. This is all about CPU performance. So but I just want to make sure that that's not skewing the figures. That's finished. So I've turned off screen recording there. That's not significantly different. So my last test is going to sound a little bit different because I'm just going to record from this camera. We're using Logic now on the Mac Studio, so I can't record through it and also play at the same time. And bounce. Started. Using 50-odd%, very similar to what we saw on the 14-inch, and we're nearly halfway through. We'll let that complete. So 114, it was 110 on the laptop, so I mean it's basically the same. The advantages of the Mac Studio with its 24 GPU cores is just not going to be significant because bouncing audio is just not a GPU exercise. So in conclusion, I've taken you through M1 Pro and how that compared to the M2 Pro Mini that I bought. As I explained very quickly, I had to change that for a Mac Studio for reasons of reliability and compatibility with some of my hardware. But really, we made a major leap when we moved to Apple Silicone back in 2020. And it ended up that small format laptops that we were burning up with Intel chips could take on some serious creative processing for video and audio editing. In the early days of M1, some of that that was a bit shaky because of some of the compatibility issues, but we quickly moved through that. And when things like the 14-inch laptop was released with M1 Pro, we ended up with much more cores, much higher performance, to the point where we really did have desktop performance in a laptop format. Moving Apple Silicone into desktop type machines, really there's not as much to be gained in doing that. We're going to get a desktop machine with all of the latest and greatest advantages of Apple Silicone compatibility, because remember now the software is really being optimized in that direction. As we've seen with Final Cut, it's running really well on these machines because of course Apple are rewriting this to take advantage of their own silicon. Why wouldn't they? So things like the Intel machines are going to fall further behind, but the superb thermal advantages of Apple Silicone in a laptop isn't so obvious when you're moving into the desktop world, because we care less about thermal efficiency because we've got frame size and fan size and cooling size where we can make it do the job very efficiently without making any noise. And we don't really care about how much power it's taking from the mains. It's not being backed up by a battery, and we're not having to make it mobile. So some of the advantages of running Apple Silicone in desktops, not so obvious. I mean, I'm really happy with this, and so it really doesn't matter about this 10 or 20% performance difference that you're going to see between an M2 machine and an M1 machine, because really what matters is the ergonomics and the practicality of the chassis that your stuff is in. So for me, I hope I've explained why I exchanged that M2 Pro Mini for a Mac Studio. I'm really happy with that. Very soon I'm going to be selling on my iMac Pro. It's going to be a great little machine for somebody because it's still doing a really good job. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Don't forget to leave comments, please. Anything that's been helpful to you, anything you want to argue about. You might disagree with me. I'm not always right. As I've said before, there's 20% of this I don't understand. What I try and do is explain the 80% that I do understand. And remember, I'll put more useful links in this YouTube description, which you'll also see below. Thank you. If this is helpful to you, subscribe, like, all that stuff.